Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Representative Summer Lee. She is representative of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District, which is Pittsburgh and environs. Congresswoman, welcome to the program. I don't know if you caught part of what we were just talking about with Jeet here, but he wrote a piece about the sort of nascent, maybe not so nascent, mutiny that's sort of taking place in the House with Mike Johnson, particularly amongst women Republican Congress folks there, because apparently Mike Johnson thinks that women have spaghetti brains and men have waffle brains.
Shocking. When you say, I literally caught the last like 5 seconds, but was still able to put the context clues together.
Well, so I mean, what is your sense of like of what has been going on with Marjorie Taylor Greene? This could be her last day, I think, or close to it. I mean, last day where she shows up. I mean, she doesn't qualify for her pension for a month, so she can hang around a little bit. But she's also done quite well. Does she do like a little like after session like little learning annexes on how you can make $25 million while you're in Congress for 4 years?
I have not received the link. But I don't know. When we talk about just what's been going over there, I think we think about it as being a this Congress phenomenon. But honestly, obviously I came in, 2023. It's been like this the entire time. So it has been a really chaotic environment. And obviously, Mike Johnson wasn't there at the beginning of that. But there's obviously been this push and pull, this tension between the real hardliners who are incidentally more likely to be women, and this new kind of culture that they've even had to deal with. I've always wondered within, Republicans before it was MAGA Republicans, what would the dynamics be as these women who are comfortable enough or with a desire to harm or oppress other communities and overlook their own oppression within their own caucus? Like, how long would that dynamic last? And I guess we're looking at that.
Yeah, I guess so. And it is interesting, too, that the fault lines also seem to fall around Epstein, right? You had these women and Marjorie Taylor Greene, at the very least, was passionate about the Epstein case. And on her way out, she was supportive of the victims. Don't give her a ton of credit, basically at all, but we'll give her a little bit there. What was that like, seeing that play out, including one of your own members being prevented from being sworn in order to help with this cover up? I mean, it must have been a totally wild ride for the past few months.
Yeah. I mean, for us, the last few months, but just for perspective, right? For the survivors, this has been years, right? It's been years. And that is back in the media in the way that it is right now. I just always want to go back to them, right? And how it feels for them to just not relive this, but also reopen wounds and threats, harms, risks, right? Because we're talking about some of the most powerful people, even now, right? We talk a lot about the Epstein Transparency Act, which was an important move from the House and the Senate all the way to the White House to bring us closer to some sort of transparency. But the DOJ has actually been obstructing justice since August. Right, we were able to secure a subpoena for all, the complete unredacted files back then. So they've actually been holding off since then, and that's been because of Trump. And it's been because of that. It's just been like this slow drip. And I'm certainly not sure why they prefer the slow drip to just ripping off the Band-Aid, but they really prefer this slow drip. So every couple of weeks, right, we get new information. We've gotten subpoenas for the banks and the estate itself, which has been, bringing out and bringing more to light. And, it's gone to mount, it's going to mount. But the lengths that they've gone to try to keep this from happening, you said it, not swearing in one of the new Democrats who won a special election, not responding to the legal subpoena, right? Johnson not bringing it to a vote in the first place makes everybody in this country wonder, what on earth is in, what on earth is in there? Because they are bending over backwards to keep this from coming to light.
And I mean, Trump could, he didn't need the legislation, right? I mean, he could have just ordered the file. He could have just said they're declassified, we're releasing them tomorrow. But he's gone through this whole thing. Do you think, is there a sense, I don't know, you know, I don't have a sense of how much insight you have to what happens in the Republican caucus. I don't get the sense that you're palling around with a lot of the Republican Congress people, but
not especially.
Do you think they're just like playing out the clock, and that the idea is that maybe the clock is, you know, we all assume Donald Trump, you know, everybody assumes that Donald Trump is going to be there for 4 years. It's only recently that he said that he wouldn't run for re-election. He sort of gave up that ghost. But, you know, there's also, it's not like Trump, we just saw him fall asleep about four or five times in a 2-hour meeting the other day. And he's, you know, I don't know what the over under is, just since we're in the gambling mode here, of Trump lasting to the end of the term. But it does sort of feel like they're playing out the clock, but not, they know they can't play it out for 4 years.
I mean, if we're talking about for Epstein, then I don't think that they can play it out, right? Again, these survivors have been waiting for years. This has, you got to think, the Epstein investigation, the files, the documents, you know, the cases that have involved the entire Virgin Islands and, you know, these banks, right? These have been, all of this has been ongoing. It has seen multiple attorneys generals, right? It's seen multiple, you know, presidencies, right. And it will be there, whether or not Trump releases it or not. It will be there when he's gone. And the DOJ will still have it, and people will still be demanding it. So if they're waiting for people to stop thinking about it, I don't think that they're going to get that. If they're waiting for their party to reclaim some sort of normalcy, I don't know when the last time they were normal. Right. I don't know that they get that either, right? Because again, we always are focusing on Trump, but at the end of the day, if Trump doesn't make it to the end of this term, or he gets to the end of the term, there's still a JD Vance. There is still this movement around them that is an agreement with the direction that they're attempting to take our country in. Right? If any of us are relying on just toppling one person or removing one person, then we are mistaken. And we should have learned that, you know, back in 2022 or 2020. And I don't think that we did, right? We are dealing with something so much deeper than just one man, one person. That goes for both Epstein and Trump, right? Right. Both of these are indicative of much larger problems and much bigger just schemes of corruption than I think we sometimes want to admit.
Do you, is it your sense, I mean, I know you've only been in Congress for a couple of years now, but is it your sense that there is two different ideas about this within the Democratic Party, to the extent that you can be aware of it? I mean, because, you know, for a long time, Barack Obama, the fever is going to break. 2008, the fever's going to break. 2010, the fever's going to break. 2012, the fever's going to break. 2016, the fever's going to break. Then Joe Biden, the fever's going to break. And I also, like, you know, even with folks like Chuck Schumer, you know, we're hoping that responsible Republicans will, you know, release these files or do something. But I also get the sense that there's a different generation or a different cohort of Democrats who also realize what you've just articulated, that this isn't a Donald Trump problem, and this isn't like a head cold. No. This is sort of endemic in the Republican Party now. What is your sense of like where your colleagues are, broadly speaking, on that?
You know, I think that follows a lot of the fault lines that we see within the Democratic Party, right? The tension that there exists between generations, the tension that exists between, you know, what we like to characterize as left versus right? The reality is that there are some people who are serving right now in the Democratic Party who can nostalgically recall a time where they got along better with Republicans, where there was a, you know, camaraderie that existed that they really, really enjoyed. And for them, it was like the Yankees and the Mets, right? You know, we might play against each other, or, you know, but we're on the same, we're playing the same sport. right? We have the same interests, like it's the same stadium, but the more you are seeing these fault lines kind of just get bigger, right? Marginalized, more marginalized people who are here, right? Marginalized folks who are just like, honestly, I've never liked the things that Republicans were willing to do to people like me and communities like mine. The more that we get in spaces like this, the less you see that same sort of like cigar country club civility, the less you see a willingness to protect them because they're a part of the institution, right? You're seeing more people who are like, the institution reflects the country, and the country is sick right now, right? The country is going in a direction that honestly might be irredeemable, right? The democracy is objectively at risk right now. Like, we are in the midst of an authoritarian government, an authoritarian takedown. And if to the extent that there are Democrats who don't want to reckon that in more than rhetoric, right, but in truth, right, that we know that if your country, if your democracy is backsliding, you probably have 2 years before it bottoms out. And if it bottoms out, you probably have 10 years before you can fix it, right? That there is an urgency right now that I don't think that we are all recognizing. So I do think that that exists. And, you know, I think it's generational. I think it is demographics of people who are more or less likely to believe that Republicans will come around.
You know, to that point, this notion of, like, you know, where we are with this authoritarianism, we had K-Sabil Rahman on the other day talking about a third Reconstruction, and that in response to what we're experiencing now, like, inevitably Democrats will be back in power. I mean,
yeah.
Hoping, you know, that well, let me put it this way, not necessarily inevitable,
right?
Right. Let me restate. The job number one is to fight that authoritarianism. In the event that Democrats get back into power, there is no reverting back to whatever the normalness was beforehand. We've seen, like, the wholesale destruction of our agencies within the government. We've seen the wholesale sort of like undermining of trust in government. And in some reason, we have a secret police force now that goes around in masks. We have a Supreme Court that sort of just is willy-nilly signing off on what is going to help Republican prospects. What do you see as the amount of change that has to happen? Like, I just saw, you know, Gavin Newsom. I can't remember where he was interviewed, but he was asked about Mamdani's taxing, and we should say Hochul is apparently, like, moving in that direction, going to allow for. And he was asked about a wealth tax, which is different than what Mamdani is proposing. He's just proposing a supplemental tax on extremely wealthy people, but it's not a wealth tax. Although I'm very much in favor of one, and Warren suggested one. But where, like, and Newsom said, we need to have a big tent. That's why we, I guess, wouldn't tax the wealth.
Which might be the most popular positioning within the Democratic Party in terms of voters that I could possibly think of, except maybe also cutting off funds to Israel.
The opposite.
Oh, no.
What is your
raising
sense?
tax on the rich?
Exactly. Show that we are not in touch with actual voters, constituents, whether they vote or not, are actually believing, because we are too closely, we're holding on to the kind of institutionalist view way too hard, right? That we're missing the mark because we can't see it. Listen, I always say this, just to answer, I think, both parts of your question. I always say this, that the Democratic Party will have to choose who it's going to be. It cannot serve two masters. And sometimes when we talk about the big tent, this is not to negate or to ignore that this is a big tent. But I do think that sometimes we use the big tent argument as an excuse to not have to do introspection, right? As an excuse to not have to take a stance. And I think that for a really long time, the Democratic Party has tried to serve two masters, right? We want to be the party of the corporations, and we also want to be the party of the people. But the people aren't having that anymore. The people no longer accept that. They see it for what it is, and they are calling on the Democrats to choose and to choose them. So the tension that we feel is, right, this idea that the Democrats think that they don't have to choose them all the way, that they can still straddle the fence. So we say it's a big tent. I do believe that we all represent our districts. But it's funny because it's like, well, we don't want a wealth tax. People, there are politicians. I don't agree, obviously. There are politicians who will, you know, bend over backwards to protect the ultra wealthy, but will not use that same energy to protect poor and working class people who are taxed, who are taxed and still can't afford their health care. They're taxed and they still can't, they still don't get, quality public schools in their district. They're taxed and their roads still are unpaved. They're taxed and they can't afford housing in the communities that they called home, communities that are by their jobs and their friends and their lives, right? I think that it's wrong-headed to continue to say that we will never consider taxing people who have just far too much.
I mean,
continuing to say that the poor are on their own and then think that Democrats will come out. The tent is going to shrink if we don't think that poor and working people are in it. I think that the last thing about that is that, like, we think that people orient themselves and they organize their lives and their politics around this left-right binary. But people are mostly like, man, there are people who have a whole bunch and there are people like me who don't got enough at all, right? There are people who, are going to be okay at the end of the day and there are people who weren't. I do not think that there is a normalcy to go back to. There is no way that we can go back. You said it, too much has been broken, too much about our checks and balances, the vulnerabilities of them have been exposed in such a way that we cannot pretend that did not happen. Even if we come out of this, to go back and pretend that none of this happens is certain doom. We have to move forward. And I think that that's exciting. I think that that presents an opportunity for us to actually be a more perfect union. I think that this was predicted by our founders. It's predicted in our Constitution that we would face times like this. I think that they also hope that we would make it through it by understanding and recognizing what we're dealing with. We're not there yet.
Right. And I think that the Big Ten argument, you said, like, they talk about building a Big Tent, but in fact, the tent has been incredibly narrowed. It has been reoriented towards like a more consultant viewpoint that micro targets based on data, specific sets of voters, and it has torched the Democratic Party's brand where there's that element. There's also the element that we have to contend with the fact that the concentration of wealth at the very top right now, which is only rivaling the Gilded Age, right, in the history of the past 150 years, is also affecting our democracy. And so if we go out and talk about democracy on the campaign trail, but we're unable to put it forward in practice and make people feel democratic outcomes and responsiveness from their government, then people are going to lose faith in democracy. That's another thing that I wish maybe some of your Democratic colleagues would contend with, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. You can't make the case for democracy, and it makes the case for fascism inadvertently with Trump when the outcomes for people are not democratic, when they don't feel like their representatives are representing their interests, and when you have that concentration of power at the very top. That's also, it might be the threat to democracy, way more than even Trump himself.
Yeah. Listen, this is the core argument that I make all the time, right? Especially if Democrats take over the House. The first thing that we will likely, in past years, in past Congresses, our HR 1 has usually been some sort of voting rights reform, democracy reform package. We are, of course, talking more about like the corruption piece. But for me, I also talk about you cannot have democracy reform and do nothing about money in politics. You just can't, right? That's why, right, getting super PACs, eliminating super PACs. That's why, reversing in Citizens United, right? Or Citizens United, all of those things are foundational to not just your democracy, but it's also foundational to all of the other things that we care about, right? Everyday people are like, oh, you ask most Americans, they believe in Medicare for All system. Well, why don't we have it? Well, because pharma and, the insurance companies, all of them have more lobbying power in Congress, more money to support and undergird campaigns than the average person does. Why can't we stop mass shootings in our schools? Well, because the NRA has, such an intimate relationship with politicians, right? Why, do we know that climate change is real? Why do we know that it is an existential crisis? But then we are now backtracking on sustainability, on renewable policy and energy sources. Well, because of money in politics. So it hits both things, right? It gets at our democracy. You can't have an oligarchy and a democracy. You can't have a corporate duopoly and a democracy. People are finding more and more that the system of government itself can't represent them. That as long as we have these, I think that the corporate duopoly is the big tent, right? That is the big tent, and it's too big, right? People need to find or feel that there is some way of accomplishing something, that there is something in this system that will be responsive to their needs. And we can't be responsive to their needs, the government, the big we, because, well, you know, I fight for what I fight for. But the House, the Congress, the judicial, all of those things can't be responsive to people if it's also being responsive to Elon Musk, if it's being responsive to big pharma, if it's being responsive to oil and gas, big fossil fuel, right? And that's what fundamentally people are seeing. And that's why they don't believe that a democracy can work anymore. Because if what we've experienced is a democracy, then maybe they don't want that. Mm-hmm. We have to address that immediately.
I mean, that's what Brandeis famously said on the cusp of the New Deal, is we can either have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few people, or we can have a democracy. You just can't have both. So when you say like the Democratic Party has to understand this, and like, we have some people in the IMs who are IM saying like, I love what the Congresswoman is saying, but will the DNC listen? Is there like, do you perceive the Democratic Party to be that there is this sort of like overarching entity that has a philosophy, or is it like a series of individuals that you need to have more individuals like yourself than the other individuals, and then that wins out?
Okay, this is the we hear. Listen, since November, we've been hearing a lot about like the DNC, and by we I mean all of us, right? All center left people, the DNC, the DCCC. What is it? I think it's less, big entity, more individuals, but the individuals who run entities matters, right? So I will say, the Democratic Party is decentralized. It is far more decentralized. The Democratic Party of Pennsylvania is not the Democratic Party of South Carolina. It's not the Democratic Party of, Iowa. That's just objectively true. The DNC, as far as I don't know the DNC. Nobody from the DNC tapped me and said, Summer, you should run for Congress, or Summer, you shouldn't run for Congress, right? Where good people exist and their communities are organized, you have the power to shape what not just the Democratic or the Republican parties look like, but the government itself. So I don't want people to think of like the DNC, the RNC as like boogeymen that make us feel like we don't have more power than we do. Because it is decentralized, yes, you may have to overcome systemic barriers. We had to do that in my district in Allegheny County, right? We had to do that. I spent last year was the first time I was ever endorsed by the Allegheny County Democratic Committee. And I won anyways, right? We were already winning, which means that people were already on our side. It was just a systemic barrier that we had to notice. We had to address them, and we had to move around it and then fix it and change it. We have since put more people now know about the party. So the Democratic Committee is the party. They know about it now. More people are so you can change those things. The question is again, in a democracy, a true democracy, power is inherently with the people. And I think that fundamentally the concern or the challenge for Americans is that we have had a real hands-off approach to democracy because we have trusted that our government will fundamentally, it might get on our nerves, right? It might not feed us. It might not invest in our schools in the way it should be, but it won't become, it won't become a fascist government, right? The Nazis won't take over, right? Mussolini will not be elected, right? So we've had a hands-off approach. It's like, I elect you, you go, you figure it out. But right now, we are actually in a point where we can't be hands-off. We have to be real in it. If you really want to change the course of things, whether it be the DNC or the president himself, the direction of the country itself, then we have to wield the power that's still vested in us. And that means your labor. That means your money. That means organizing. That means sending people who you want. That means taking on the system head on. We have the power to do all those things. So I would say it's decentralized. And that does not absolve the people in leadership of leading and of leading in a way that's responsive to people. I think both of those things are happening.
Lastly, Representative Lee, I know you have to run in a bit, but I am curious just about your reflections on this last election cycle, because two of the members of the squad and company, two of our favorites, Representative Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, were really just taken out by a cannon of AIPAC money. And I remember early on, during that time period, you were a third name that was discussed about how a target of AIPAC, but you withstood it. And of course, Ilhan Omar also received a lot of Israel money spending against her. She withstood it too. But how do you reflect on how you were able to overcome that in ways? And even when you contrast it with what your colleagues experienced, it must have been an incredibly kind of difficult hurdle.
Yeah, it wasn't my first rodeo, right? I'm actually one of the first races that AIPAC as an actual PAC, right? Not DMFI, but like AIPAC's PAC, United Democracy Project. My cycle was the first cycle that they actually got in personally in elections. So not just bundling, but also through their IE spend. So I was one of the first races that they went in. That's where they practiced all of their tactics, not to ever talk about Israel or Palestine, but to instead talk about whether we're good enough Dems, whether we support, Joe Biden well enough, things like that. Their tactics were egregious. And who they targeted was not incidental. It was not an accident. Right. The districts, the people that they targeted. So I was the only person who outlasted them that first time. And the second time, we organized. We worked. I worked hard. At the end of the day, when people say, why did you survive and others? I mean, part of it is that we work, but also part of it is that I'm grateful. I'm blessed. I'm lucky. People support me. We work hard in our district. And I'd say that not to say that or to undermine me and my team, the work that we do, but it is to say that there are candidates who are brilliant, who are equally brilliant, who should be, they are representative of their constituents, of their districts, of their neighborhoods. They've been on the streets, they've been in the trenches. There's nothing that says that they shouldn't have been in Congress as much as I should have been. But sometimes that money hits different. And I want to say it wasn't just AIPAC against Cori and Jamal, because I don't want to let any money in politics off the hook. My issue ain't just with AIPAC. My issue is with all of it. So crypto PACs actually spent more than any industry in elections last year. They were the number one spender. And yes, they also went in many of the places that AIPAC went to. So it was a 1-2 whammy for Cori and Jamal and for others who never made it in the first place. So that's why it's so important that it's like, listen, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't unleash big money on your progressive enemies or your progressive, gnats, those of us who, you're like, we want to protect the institution, so we don't want too many progressives here. You can't be comfortable with unleashing that on our districts, unleashing that into our politics, and think that it won't be a wildfire, because it has been a wildfire. Since that type of money has been into our politics, you have seen an exponential rise in outside spending, right, just objectively, right? Every cycle. So Cori's and Jamal's was the most expensive House primary in history. Cori's was the second most expensive House primary in history. And it will only get worse if we don't stop it. And that means that it isn't just a weapon against progressives. It ain't a weapon against MAGA. It's a weapon against our democracy, because the interests of one interest group should not outweigh the interests of the people in their districts, the people in our country. And that's fundamentally what's happening right now. So to outlast it, yeah, we have to raise money. Absolutely. We have to knock on the door. Certainly. We have to show up to work, and we have to, we have to deliver. We have to do all the things that so many other people who had been in office for hundreds of years just don't have to do. We have to get up earlier. We have to stay ready, so we don't got to get ready when you're Black or brown or progressive. And we recognize that. And we will do that.
I got one last question. I know you got to go, but one last question in that regard. And I think your point is very well taken too about that money, because that money's being raised and there's people invested in raising that money and then expending it. And it's sort of like almost like when, rates were at zero, still have wealthy people who want to go make their money work. And so they start creating bubbles. And if there's not enough Jamal Bowmans and Cori Bushes for them to deploy that money on, they're going to start deploying it on other people as well. So it's not going to just end there. But as a member of the squad, we don't hear about the squad so much as we did maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But as a member, like internally, do you guys have any theories of change? I mean, obviously, like you're relying on organizing in your district. That's how you get elected, and it's about people power in those districts. But within the context of the inside game, do you have theories of change that you talk about? Like, is there a strategy beyond, slowly primarying and maybe very blue areas and getting more? What is the theory of change that you guys employ within the context of the inside game?
Well, I will say that for me personally, right, my theory of change is not, it cannot, and it will not exist if it is only reliant on, 6 of us talking to each other or 6 of us being it. It is contingent on you all, on the people, on our movement to be a part of that. Because like at the end of the day, we can't hasten the process of more progressives, more, justice, pro-peace, pro-human rights candidates making it to Congress. We have political capital, but it ain't endless. So the answer is, yeah, we absolutely do need more people because we have a Congress of 435 people, and it is a Congress by majority. So by the mathing, we got to make the math. That's number one. But part of that doing that is not just organizing in our district, but it is how do we use our districts to create a model of what's possible. And how do we then invest in other areas so that they can do that same thing? There are places around this country, and they aren't just deep blue places, because my district is not a deep blue district, right? My district is not a majority Black or majority person of color district, right? It is a majority white, majority suburban district in Western Pennsylvania, which means that our policies, our vision for the country, it works. It works in other places. And we have to make the case. But that does mean that we have to be out there. That does mean that we have to encourage investments into the apparatuses that help us. And I don't just mean electorally, but it does have to be electorally. I'm somebody who believes simultaneously that we have to use every single tool at our disposals. Yeah, we do need people in government, because the reality is that you can't mutual aid the government. You can't out mutual aid, or you can't out organize systemic discrimination. We have to be able to end it here or mitigate it here so that the people on the outside can be comfortable, can be healthy, can be safe, right? It can be prosperous. But we also have to do those things. So I'm a hand-to-hand person. I believe that right now, the thing that we need most are empowered electorates. So my theory of change is that we need people right now from the outside. No major change in our country has come from Congress by itself. It just hasn't, right? The Civil Rights Act, the abolition of slavery, voting rights, the end of the anti-war and anti-apartheid movements all came from people moving the Congress, from people moving power, wielding power. And I believe in that to this day, which is why I believe in the power of young people entering the time-honored tradition of student activism. I believe in that deeply. I believe in the power of organized labor. I think that that's why, the president has attacked the two things that undergird democracy: education and organized labor, right? Mm. I believe in a disciplined, use of your money or withholding of your money. I believe in those things. And at the same time, yeah, we have to build more power on the inside. We do have to be in ranking positions and chairmanships. Yeah, that's all inside game. That helps. It helps the outside, not vice versa, right? Or kind of vice versa. But it is important, but it isn't the end all be all. But it has to happen. We do need to be able to get more people. We need to create an opt-in for the inside, and we've been able to do that. I'll leave on this, right? Take AIPAC, for instance, in Money in Politics. When we first introduced the Ceasefire Now resolution, I think it was about 9 of us, all people of color, right? All uber progressives. Maybe we got some other people who started calling for like conditional, we want a bilateral, ceasefire. I'm like, they all are, right? But in that year, we were never able to move. This year, we have now for the first time, we had 50-something people on the Block the Bombs Act. Of those 50-something people, a number of them are people who have actually received AIPAC dollars. Some of them have gone on the AIPAC trip, right? They have now publicly said that they will not accept AIPAC dollars. we are moving hearts and soul. We are moving people. So I just want to mention that because of the noise outside, because of the organizing, because of the righteous indignation, the moral stance, people in Congress are getting the message. And because we are there, we're able to have the bills, we're able to have the letters, we're able to have the organizing things that they can now attach themselves to. So we're giving them an opportunity to come to the right side of history, because our objective at the end of the day is to end a genocide. Our objective at the end of the day is to end racialized capitalism. And all of those things means we need more people in both spaces.
Representative of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District, Summer Lee, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.